about demographic and environmental trends. But the reason for this concern is the effect on an economic trend, food prices. In 2007 and early 2008, we saw a tripling of world wheat, rice, corn, and soybean prices. They have since subsided somewhat, but they have not gone back to historical levels. The next time there's a tightening, and there will be a next time, could be this year, could be next year, could be the year after, we're again going to see a dramatic rise in grain prices. So what I anticipate, particularly as the price of oil goes up, is sort of a ratchet effect where food prices will be on an upward trend, though fluctuating about that trend. That then translates, that has social effects. And the social trend of most concern to me is the increasing number of hungry people in the world. If we continue with business as usual, which we call Plan A, if we continue with business as usual, the number of hungry people is going to continue increasing. During the closing decades of the last century, the number of hungry people in the world was declining. It got down to about 825 million and then started to slowly rise. Then in 2007 went over 900 million, 2008 over 1 billion, and the projections are that there'll be more hungry people in the world by 2015 than there are today. We started with environmental trends, then an economic trend, food prices, then a social trend, the number of hungry people in the world. And incidentally, with the capacity to convert grain into fuel for cars that we now have, we are creating competition between the 900 million people in the world who own cars and who want to fuel those cars and the 2 billion poorest people in the world competing for the same grain supplies. The difference between the two groups is their average income. The average income of an automobile owner is about $30,000 per year. The average income among the 2 billion poorest people in the world is about $3,000 per year. So in this competition for grain supplies between cars and people, it's easy to see who's going to win unless we establish some limits on the amount of grain we convert into fuel for cars. And that's a particular interest here in Europe. I was at the European Parliament a few days ago, and this issue is now being debated there because increasingly there is the realization that converting more and more grain to fuel is going to be driving up food prices and adversely affecting the world's poorest people. We started with demographic and environmental trends, then an economic trend, then a social trend. But the bottom line indicator for me, the one that I think will tell us more about our future than any other trend, is the growing number of failing states in the world. A failing state is a country where the government can no longer guarantee where the government can no longer provide personal security, that is where law and order breaks down, and the government that can no longer provide food security. One of the failing states in the world is Haiti. I don't know if you noticed during the earthquake and the TV coverage that you almost never saw the government of Haiti. You saw UN peacekeepers, forces that I think there are 7,000 whose job is to provide personal security in Haiti, and the UN World Food Program, which is the principal source of outside food for Haiti. It is the food lifeline that keeps food prices under control in that country. Haiti is an example of a failed state. There are many others. Afghanistan. The government really doesn't control the country. Local warlords do, and now increasing the Taliban. Pakistan doesn't control part of its geographical territory. Somalia, Yemen, Democratic Republic of the Congo. A long and growing list. The concept of failing states has become part of our vocabulary only in the last decade or two. But the fact that the list grows longer now year by year raises a disturbing question, which is what happens if this keeps going? How many failing states before our global civilization begins to unravel? We don't know the answer to that, but we do know that failing states have a huge impact on the rest of the world. Afghanistan, for example, is now the source of 90% of the world's heroin. Somalia, piracy in the seas off the coast of Somalia. There are now 17 countries with naval units in the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, the Gulf of Suez, trying to protect commercial shipping and not being very successful. 17 countries with naval units there, and they can't control small bands of Somali pirates. The world is facing great change in the years ahead. The question is whether that change will come because we recognize that business as usual, plan A, is no longer a viable option, and move to plan B and control the change, or because we stay with business as usual and face change associated with continuing mounting economic stresses in the food sector, a growing number of failing states, and all the consequences of those trends continuing. Plan B has 4 components. Cut carbon emissions 80%, not by 2050, which is what political leaders like to talk about, but by 2020. We didn't start with the politics, we started with the science. And if we want to have a decent chance at saving the Greenland ice sheet, we're going to have to cut carbon emissions fast. Even that won't guarantee that we'll save it, but at least it means we have a chance of doing so. If we stay with business as usual, and the Greenland ice sheet goes, as it will, I doubt that civilization could survive the stresses associated with that kind of rise in sea level, with the hundreds of millions of rising sea refugees it would bring. The second component of Plan B is to stabilize population at no more than 8 billion. The third is to eradicate poverty, providing basic elementary school education for children everywhere, girls as well as boys, providing at least rudimentary health care, childhood immunization, for example, in villages throughout the world. And the interesting thing about these two trends is that they tend to reinforce each other. The faster we shift to smaller families, the more people can break out of poverty. The more poverty we can eradicate, the faster the shift to smaller families. So these two trends are really sort of an integral part of the same package. And the fourth component of Plan B is to restore the economy's natural support systems, forests, aquifers, fisheries, grasslands, soils, and to stabilize the climate system. These are the real challenges that we face. Let me talk for a minute about cutting carbon emissions. There are 2 ways of doing this. One is to raise energy efficiency throughout the world economy. The other is to shift from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy. One example of increasing efficiency, if we shift from incandescent light bulbs, the old-fashioned incandescents, to compact fluorescents, we can reduce electricity use by 70%. If we go from incandescents to the newest, most advanced technology, LEDs, light-emitting diodes,